We're talking about fresh fish. We're going to talk about ways to identify freshness, the different ways that we can buy this, and actually how to break this down from a whole salmon, or in this case, a dressed salmon, and break this down into a whole side, where the bones are. We'll talk about muscle structure a little bit. So when we talk about fish, and we're typically talking about saltwater fish, there's two general categories of fish. There's round fish and there's flat fish. Flat fish are flat. Okay, they have a compressed body. So think of this as something that's pressed down, like a flounder or sole or halibut. They typically are bottom dwellers. They're pretty sedentary. When they're first born, they have eyes on both sides of their head like this, and as they mature, they migrate to one side of their head, because they swim horizontally. They don't swim vertically like this fish does. Okay, so the belly on those fish, since they're typically on the bottom, is typically white, and the top side can be gray or brown or black and can change. It's a protection mechanism. It'll camouflage itself because they're really not a predatory fish. Very light, flaky fish. So when we talk about cooking methods, we have to know that. We have to take that into consideration. So we really wouldn't take a piece of sole and throw it on the grill, because it really doesn't have the muscle structure to accommodate that. So we would poach it or saute it. We could deep fry it. We could pan fry it. Okay, very light, flaky. This is a round fish. The majority of the fish that are in the ocean are round fish. Okay, there are three categories of round fish. There's low activity, medium activity, high activity. This is a high activity fish. That also helps you determine how to cook it. So we talk about low activity fish: haddock, cod, hake, pollock. So if you've ever gone to the market and you've got a piece of cod, and we use cod here, it's a pretty delicate fish. It's very flaky. It's another fish that we probably wouldn't put on the grill. We could bake it, we could poach it. It has a different muscle structure. A medium activity fish would be something like a grouper, okay, or a black sea bass that has a little more, it swims through the ocean a little deeper, a little faster. And then your high activity fish. These are a firmer fish. So with these fish, we really can do this any method of cooking we want. We can poach it, we can steam it, we can smoke it, we can cure it, put it on the grill, bake it, whatever we really want to do, okay? And then the other types of fish are like a non-bony fish would be swordfish. What else? Swordfish, shark or marlin would be non-bony fish. A bluefin tuna would be non-bony fish. And then we call other fish like skate or say eel, okay? So when we buy this like whole, there's different market forms that we have to be aware of. When this fish is intact with its guts, or it's called its viscera, okay, that's called a whole fish. I order this, I said I want a whole salmon. I tell them the size I want, 10 to 12 pounds, okay, drawn. That means all they've done to it is they've taken out the insides, they've taken out the organs, okay, which I want, because once the animal is dead, just like when you go hunting, you've killed the animal, you have to gut it, because those organs are still retaining a lot of heat. And what they're doing is they start to break down the meat. So when I order a whole fish like this, I say, give it to me drawn. I could say I want it dressed. That means they've taken the tail off, they've taken the head off, they've taken the viscera out, and they've taken the fins off, okay? We can also say I want steaks. They'll do the same thing. Fins, head, tail, and then cut this into steaks. Or fillets, which we're going to do today. We're going to take the whole side off. I could say I want a 10 to 12 skin off PBO. That means it came from a 8 to 10 pound fish. This is 10 to 12, okay? When I say fillet, skin off, they've removed the skin, and then they've taken these bones out that run from about here to there. That's why I have my needle nose pliers over here. So everything that's done to this animal prior to it getting to you costs money. So this was $5.55 a pound for the whole fish. So we go, wow, that's great. Well, when we get done with it, let's see what we actually paid for. Because I'm not going to use, for my purposes, I'm not going to use the head, I'm not going to use the tail, I'm not going to use the skeleton inside. I just want this. So I'm going to guess it's going to run me about $12 a pound once I'm all done. Okay? So we can certainly use the head and the bones inside for stock. Salmon, for my purposes, it has a very distinct flavor. If I was going to make a stock, like we're going to make a chicken stock or a beef stock, which we did when we did chicken fabrication, we took the bones and we added vegetables and a mirepoix and all that stuff. We do the same with the bones of the fish. Okay? But I would use a white fish. I would use cod or halibut or hake, okay, because it has a very benign flavor. It's very mild, and I can do a lot more things with it. And we can do the same thing making a white sauce with the bones of the stock. All right? So we buy a whole fish. We want to look for freshness. There's a lot of different things on this that will tell me if it's fresh or not. Okay? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and I'm going to look at the gills. So if you notice, they're a bright red color. That's what I want. If it comes in, it's brownish, it's kind of that brick rusty color, I don't really want that. Now, if you look on the other side, you'll notice it kind of doesn't look as red as the other side. This side had been sitting in the ice and sitting in the water, so you have to be aware of that as well. So that's why you always want to make sure that you're checking both sides of the gills. Okay? I'm going to look at the eyes. Okay? Hopefully it's not going to be staring back at me, but I look at the eyes and they should be clear, not cloudy. So if it looks like there's a film over the eye, you know, that tells us, well, this might be a little bit old. Okay? If this had scales and the scales run like so, shingled down, and I took a knife and I just went like this and they started to flake off, it tells me it's a little bit older. If I did that and they remained intact, it tells me it's pretty fresh. Okay? I'm also going to look at the fins. Okay? This has 6 fins on it. You have your dorsal fin right here. You have your adipose fin here, your tail or your caudal fin here, pectoral fin, pelvic fin, anal fin. Okay? They use all these to swim. All right? So I'm going to feel them. I feel that tail. It feels moist. It doesn't look dried out. You'll see this. They'll start to stick together. So it's going to be a little bit dried out. Okay? I start feeling it. This is the other thing we look at. We want to make sure this is firm. If you push your finger in there and can watch it really come back to where it was, that means the meat's breaking down. And that means it's an older fish. Okay? The other thing that we're going to look at too is we're going to look inside to see if any of the bones that are in here are protruding into the meat. That tells me that the internal organs were left in here too long and it started to break down the meat. So it's very soft and the bones are pushing into the meat. That's called belly burn. Okay? So now also if the fins were still on here, I would feel it. It should feel slimy. Okay? There's a layer of protective mucus on this that protects it from bacteria in the sea. Shouldn't be like slippery, but it should be slick. Okay? And really the last thing I do is I smell it. If it smells like fish, it's old. It should smell like the ocean. Okay? It should smell briny. It shouldn't have a displeasing smell to it. Okay? Okay. Just wash my hands real quick. Any questions so far? No. Okay. So we can break this down a bunch of different ways. Okay. I typically, when I'm going to do this, I have my French knife and I also have my boning knife. I could use my boning knife for this whole thing. I am more comfortable starting with a boning knife because what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to get underneath this collar right here, make sure I get all that meat instead of just chopping the head off here. I'm going to be losing all of this flesh in here. So what I'll do is I'll come under here with my boning knife and I'll come down and I'll basically score it all the way to the end of the fish. And then what I'll do is I'll come in with my French knife, get in there, and I'm gonna run it the length of the fish, okay? So now when I'm doing this, as I'm moving this way, I'm gonna angle my knife down just a bit so I'm really kind of going into that bone, okay? But I'm also pressing down on that bone. So as I'm coming in, I'm gonna get all that meat because I don't wanna leave any meat on there. Now, when we talked about vegetables, we talked about always protecting this hand. So as you can see, I do have a safety glove on because I'm gonna be bringing a big knife fairly rapidly towards my hand. So as I'm coming down here, I wanna apply pressure. So as I'm here, I'm underneath here because this still could come up and cut me in the hand. As I move down, I'm only exposing as much of my hand as I have to. When I get down to here, I'm basically gonna move my hand over here and finish it up, okay? And then I'll turn it over and I'll do the same on the other side, okay? So what we wanna do is we wanna find where that collar is, okay? I'm just gonna score it a little bit so I can get my in here. Okay, so now you're gonna hear it's gonna start to sound like it's crunching because I'm gonna be scraping. I'm gonna be going right into that bone. Okay, and I always want to see where the other side of my knife is. Because if I'm not, I could be inadvertently cutting up like this, and I get to it, and I've left all sorts of meat on the bone. All right? So, I'm going to come in here. Can you hear that? See how I'm protecting my hand? Okay. Down at the end. So we want we don't want to see hack marks in this, okay? So there is definitely going to always be some meat left on this animal. So now what I'm going to do is flip it over. I'm going to talk about how we finish this up. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do the same on this side. Okay. So I'm looking to make sure that I'm trying to go right inside of that dorsal fin. Right, pressing down so it's going right into the bone. So that's what we have left. So you're not obviously going to get everything, but as you can see, I came pretty close. So what I can do from here is I may not want to waste this. I may want to start kind of scraping this meat out of here. Can't sell it for anything, so I can do something like if I own a restaurant, maybe I'm going to make some salmon cakes out of this. I make some salmon burgers. I do something. If I was going to make a mousse or a mousseline, I can use this meat right here because I can't really use it for anything else. Okay? So I'm going to put this aside. Okay. So now, do is I'm going to clean this up. So this meat down here is usable. I don't know if I'd want to sell it as a fillet in a restaurant. Okay, my customers really want this nice clean meat up here. So I'm going to come in here clean that up. Now again, I'm not going to throw this out. I'm going to find a use for this somewhere. But for what I bought this for, I can't use this. So now, cost-wise, this really doesn't, this counts against me. Okay? So I'm going to clean this side up a little bit. And you notice when we talked about cutting vegetables, I always said, keep that knife steeled. Remember that? Well, in this case, I just want to make sure my knife is sharp enough to get through this initial part, because when I skin this fish, I don't want to raise a sharp knife. Because if I angle this just a little bit wrong, it's going to go right through the skin. And now I have to struggle to take the skin off of this. So I'm going to clean this side up as well. So now, what was 12 pounds, I'm going to guess is somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 pounds. Okay? So before we skin it, what I do is I feel these fillets up here. Here are the two sides of the animal. So if you can see right up here, see these bones that are sticking out, the little pin bones. In a hotel or restaurant setting, I may go through 300 pounds of salmon a day because I have a banquet for 500 or 600 people. I don't have time to do this. The customer's paying me good money. I'll pay the vendor good money to have this come in cleaned up. So I'll say, I want this 8 to 10 PBO. That means someone else has done this for me. Okay, they've taken the pin bones out. So what we do is we use a pair of pliers or tweezers, and as you can see, sometimes they come out nice and easy. The bigger ones, as you can see, there's some struggle there. If I just pulled it, a lot of times it's going to bring the meat with it. So as I'm pulling it up, I always want to hold it down. Okay, and I just run this like so to make sure I get all the pin bones out. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay. Typically there's about 8 to 10 pin bones in there. So now we want to skin this. Before I skin this, I have to determine, you know, what am I going to do with this? So if I wanted to make, say, smoked salmon, what I would do is I would leave this exactly like it is. I would salt this, okay? I would bring out the moisture because that's a preservation method. So when you buy smoked salmon, it's typically not cooked. You smoke it at about 80 to 100 degrees. We cook fish at 135 degrees. So you'll notice when you buy smoked salmon, it almost looks like this. When you buy hot smoked salmon, it looks like it came out of the oven, okay? So what we would do is we would salt this, maybe add some aromatics to this or whatever we wanted to do. We would let that sit for about a day, and then we would rinse it off, and then we would let it dry in a refrigerator. And then it becomes really kind of sticky. It's called the pellicle, okay? From that point, then we could bring it to a cold smoker, where we have a smoking chamber. We funnel the smoke into another chamber that's cooled, and at 80 to 100 degrees, we would cold smoke this. Hot smoke it, again, would be about 150 degrees, where it changes the makeup of the fish, all right? So we're gonna skin this right now. All right, so I always wanna give myself enough room here. I'm gonna bring these boards right to the edge of the table. So I just make a little notch so I can start this, and you notice I'm just kind of getting that going. So I just want to have enough on here that I can grab onto this. So as I'm moving forward, I'm pulling the skin back, and then every so often I'll flip the whole piece up to see where I'm at. Did I cut into the meat? Did I cut through the skin? Do I have to do some damage control here? So I want to get a nice, and again, my angle is just a little below horizontal. okay? I don't want to be like this. I don't want a super sharp knife. I don't want to be up like this. I just want to be just a hair below horizontal. So just like when we steel a knife at 25 degrees, that's probably about where we want to be, okay? So as I flip it over, we look pretty good, okay? Come up here, put my knife, again, I always want to see that tip of my knife. Okay, so as you can see, we didn't really dig into the fish at all. You know, left a tiny little bit here. This is probably an ounce or two. Okay, so that's that fish. And then we'll take our other side. And again, you don't really want to do much damage to this, because again, we always want to think about presentation. Okay, they look good. I don't want to drop it on the floor either. If we were to store these, we would store flesh to flesh. Okay, so again, this side here, very little is left on here. So again, be careful that the sharpness of your knife. Okay, so again, now if we took that scale again, we're not done, because if we're going to serve these as, what do we sell here, 4 ounce, which is good because I can get more 4 ounces out of here than I could get an 8 ounce. But now I get down to the tail part, I may have this left. Well, I can't really serve this, can I, in our setting? So this goes to this pile. I need to find something else to do with this. So what started as 12 pounds, I'm gonna say is down to 5, maybe. So what was $6 a pound is now $13 or $14 a pound. Okay, so we do have to factor this in, what we're doing. Okay, that's why when we talk about variance and all these things, this stuff is not cheap. Okay, this stuff is very expensive. So every little bit that we don't waste stays in our pocket. And if this was your business, you would have to say, hey, do I have the time to do this? Do I have the skill level to do this? Do I have enough people that really know how to cut fish? No, then I have to buy it. I have to buy it already done for me. Okay? That's it. Good. Questions?